all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. Somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Hey, Off Color fam. This is our special Martin Luther King Jr. episode. I'm Rebecca Henderson, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Gregory Diggs, and our producer, James. I wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Especially because today is his birthday.
Today is the actual birthday.
And we typically do not get his actual birthday off. We get whatever day it falls on.
Third Monday.
Right.
Yeah.
Unlike holidays like the 4th of July, for example, where if it falls on a Wednesday, then we get off Wednesday, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter. Is there something to that? I don't know. Am I reading too much into it? What do you think, Dr. Diggs?
I don't have any thoughts on that question.
I do know that there are 9 living, currently sitting senators who opposed MLK Day as a federal holiday. And I'm going to leave it up to the audience to guess which political party they are members of.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, you're throwing out riddles now. Okay.
So here's something that I will say. I am old enough to remember being in elementary school and middle school when it was not a national holiday, such that my elders were actually marching in the streets just to get it to be a holiday. So I remember a time when it wasn't a holiday at all.
Can I have you date yourself? You're in elementary school when?
The 1970s.
Okay.
The 1970s. And I graduated from high school. I'm class of 1980.
Okay.
All right. And so it has some personal meaning to me. And I'll just go ahead and do this now. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, as was Martin Luther King. My father was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and he marched with Martin Luther King. And so where I grew up in Washington, D.C., the elders that I grew up under were always pushing for, first, the holiday. And then once the holiday came, they pushed for the memorial that is now on the mall in Washington, D.C. And that was an original idea of gentlemen that I grew up with. They were, I grew up with them like in my kitchen, and I was in theirs. And so as a member of the fraternity, we really do pay attention to this day. And we usually show up in force at the Parade here in Denver, because the Parade is one of the largest celebrations of Martin Luther King Day in the country.
Mm-hmm. So I had never heard of a Parade before I moved here. I'm not from Denver. I'm from New York.
Me either. And I'm from New York as well.
So,
yeah.
So that is something that, for example, today, did you march today?
I did not. It was too cold, and I am old.
It was cold, but I guess I kind of, it got me to thinking, H. Soul, he's a local activist here in Denver, right? And he had some thoughts on it. And one of those thoughts, though, was we don't need to march, like a march without a reason isn't a protest. And I don't know, I guess I'm just wondering, is it the best, most inclusive way to honor his legacy?
I have mixed feelings about it. I do think that the marches and this march, particularly the one in Denver, when you take a look at the people who are in the crowd, it is a living testament to the dream that he had. So I think there is some symbolism in that. But I do also feel like we've been doing many, many years of marching, and we've been taking it for granted as if somehow marching in the Parade is somehow substantive or revolutionary. And it's no longer revolutionary. And so I do actually believe we need to be doing more.
Maybe it's sort of, this is always what happens. This is what the Gay Pride March has to argue about too, is when you become a state-sanctioned march, is it just that the state is letting you have your little show in the corner as long as you don't make too much noise? And is it not really in the spirit of the original thing? Or should people be allowed to celebrate Dr. King, who's one of the greatest figures that's lived in this society, and not have to feel guilty about the way that they celebrate him?
Well,
I mean, I don't know.
I think what you're saying is another, fantastic angle on the situation. And my response to even that would be something like this. It is amazing to me today how we have these marches and ceremonies, and we act as if, romantically, we've always loved these people. And we've always loved these issues as American issues. But I remember when people hated gay folks, for real. I remember when people hated Muhammad Ali. And I even remember when people hated Martin Luther King. And one of the things that we need to work on is that's part of the frustration, is that the Americanization of Martin Luther King and the romanticization of Martin Luther King is not actually a real representation of what he really stood for and why we even march. I hear white folks today saying, oh, I wish you all would be more like King.
Okay, well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because at this time, we did put out a call on our Facebook page, which is Off Color Podcast. You can just look us up. But we did ask for some questions, and I did have one from Hashim Jones. Why is Dr. King the standard that is imposed upon me and other blacks by white people? That we should act as Martin Luther King Jr. acted. We should be peaceful, because I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up watching that film about Dr. King, where it was always, he was a peaceful protester, and this is the right way to do it, and this is the right way to say your piece. You must never be a disruptor. You must be peaceful. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Hashim Jones, but it seems like that is kind of what you're trying to get at, that there's only one way to be a black person in America. And the acceptable way for you to be black in America is to be like Dr. King, and as our friend Tony, what's his last name, Pigford, said, he calls it the Santa Clausification of Dr. Martin Luther King. Who he really was and what he really stood for is not known widespread publicly to the people.
That it's always interesting to me when we act like we don't know our history or we don't know our legends. And I'm going to go back way before Martin Luther King, because I'm reminded that even when people in America talk about religion and Christianity, we talk about the peacefulness of Jesus Christ and how Jesus was so peaceful. And I believe in that. At the same time, I actually happen to know that in our Bible, Jesus turned over tables, all right? Jesus was not always...
Republicans don't want to hear about how Jesus felt about the money changers.
That's right. And so I said, when you know the complete history and you don't subscribe only to the romanticized history, you have a more whole picture of what we're really talking about.
But isn't it also just totally hypocritical? I mean, even if King were the character that he's sold to be, even if he were this Santa Claus character, most of America would still have hated him. And they hated him as he was. I mean, and it's this isn't conjecture. I mean, all you need to...
As he was and when he was.
Right. All you need to look at is public polling and opinion on football players taking a knee. There's no less violent act in the world than kneeling. And so this idea that that people should be more like King. I mean, there's, even if you do the most low-level, sanitized sort of protest that exists, you still don't get the support of the majority of people in the country, the majority of white people, certainly. And so, I mean, all of that is just a lie. The idea of King is a lie. But even if that fantasy ideal of King were King, white America would still hate him.
Yeah, the fantasy is a lie. The actual history is not. What people fail to understand about King is that even if he was talking about peaceful direct action, he was talking about disruptive direct action. He was shutting things down. He was making not only uncomfortable, he was disrupting. Oh, if you want to talk about the capitalist system, in Birmingham, he shut things down. He's like, we're doing this boycott because there's this idea of interest convergence where you identify what the interest of the oppressor is and say, we can't only appeal to the mind and the hearts of the people. We know this is an economic thing, and we've got to threaten their profits. And it's like, if we don't, we're the ones who are on these buses. If we're not on these buses, what they gonna do? That's radical. That's direct action. And he was shutting things down. He was not killed by accident. Okay? He lost his life because his peaceful rhetoric and action were a threat to the powers that be. So then we rewrite it as if, we want you to be all nice, like Dr. King. Yeah. Dr. King wasn't nothing nice.
Well, and he wasn't that. The other thing about the Santa Claus angle is, you want to talk about Birmingham. How old is Dr. King when he organizes that boycott? He's 26 years old. How old is he when he dies? He's 39.
Right.
So again, this Father Christmas, Santa Claus, nice old man sort of image, it's fake. He died as a young man, and he did most of his best work as a very young man.
Right.
And so he was full of the radical spirit of youth. And the image of him as this sort of grandfatherly figure is a later perversion of who he was. The story of King, what he crammed into a tiny life.
And that's what's
brings me to tears every time.
No, you're like getting me in my feelings right now where I'm like ready to start.
It honestly does.
This was sparked when a few weeks ago when my son came and joined us. He said that, a challenge in America is, the young revolutionaries, become the old establishment. And what has to happen is that the young people have to now then take on the old folks again. And so when I hear him say that, I'm like, ooh. But it's more than that. When I think of your children and when I think of your son and some of the children that I see who are just at the feet of the parents who are talking about this stuff, I'm like, the future doesn't even know. It's getting ready to go down again because the kids are coming up in this. And one thing we have to do is hold on. We still got to do our own struggle. We got to do our own. I'm like, but these kids right here, I'm like, and actually I'm talking in general, but I'm talking about your kids specifically.
King's in the White Panther.
I'm like, ooh, people are not ready for what's going to happen.
It's funny that you say that because that's something that I think about, and this is just one of these thought experiments. I never really thought of it like this. If Dr. King were still alive, which is hard to imagine because it's hard to imagine how much different the country would be anyway. But would he be sort of an Al Sharpton or even a Cornel West figure where they're starting to look like old guard and they're starting to look like guys who are not, we just watched this public beef between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Cornel West where, nobody can talk down Cornel West bona fides as a civil rights leader, but it is starting to look like a bit of a changing of the guard. It's interesting to think about that. I wish he were still around and we could see it one way or the other.
It's hard to know. What do you think, Rebecca?
I think I'd probably be like, this old dude doesn't know what's going on now. Now, I know that sounds crazy to say, but let's be real.
Sure.
Because think about, like, Jesse Jackson. Like you gave an example, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson. Like, I feel like those are people that are, like, I wouldn't really necessarily consider them relevant figures right now.
Right.
Is Al Sharpton alive?
Well, yes. Al Sharpton is very much alive, and he's never looked better. But no, you think about this with anything. If we sit around and talk about, if Kurt Cobain or Biggie Smalls were still alive or whatever, the reality is they would be has-beens by now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
Well, and we still wonder. We still will wonder. I mean, I think that's right. I think they were already one of the reasons in my mind that if you remember at the time of his death, Martin Luther King Jr. had been revered, but now he was starting a poor people's campaign, and now he was speaking out against Vietnam, and so on the horizon was going to be a demonization of Martin Luther King. So it's not clear that he would have been as popular as he was if he would have continued to live. We don't know. On the other hand, that poor people's campaign is a thing that's just now being revived today. On the other hand, when you're talking about Martin Luther King was kind of progressive.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And one of the reasons why Cornel West is so upset is because our liberal rhetoric has not been as progressive as he would like it to be. So I don't know the answer to the question. I suspect, as you do, that at this age they would have been working on MLK long enough that that his reputation would not have been as romantic. At the same time, some of the things he's been talking about are being talked about today.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, ooh, that's Martin Luther King right there. Even Bernie Sanders. Now, see, I just said that. I'm not sure I even wanted to say that. But the progressive, what I'll say is that
That's
the
cool.
progressive.
This is how we get Killer Icon. Keep
right.
saying good things about him.
But the progressive talk is the legacy of Martin Luther King. Part of the legacy of Martin Luther King.
I mean, the March on Washington, people don't remember what it was for. It was not a general March on Washington. It was a March on Washington for jobs.
Right.
So March on Washington for employment and economic opportunity. King was talking about the same things that Theo Wilson was sitting here talking
That's
about
right.
2 weeks ago,
That's
about
right.
how without economic enfranchisement, without jobs, people do not have a position in the society.
Right.
It wasn't just general feel good, everybody's the same inside, and
That's
race is a social construct.
That's right.
It was, let's make some substantive changes. He argued for reparations.
Right.
He argued for all kinds of things that people who lionize him, white people who
Right.
lionize him, if you brought them up point by point, would vociferously
right.
disagree with.
One of the things he was talking about in his letter from a Birmingham jail was that, the Ku Klux Klan and the, really white supremacists is one thing. But part of the real problem was the nice folks who were saying, well, let's wait and let's not do it yet and let's find the right place and time.
Yeah.
And he was starting to recognize and speak out and say, it is the nice white people, it's the nice liberal people, and he was actually talking to clergy.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well,
he
and
was actually talking to clergy.
We should specify it was specifically a letter in response to a letter from clergy in the South, who were white clergy were basically saying, we sympathize with the plight of black people, but it's just too much too soon, and you're stoking people's the same shit we hear about the alt-right and Trump and everything, that by calling things what they are, you're stoking the embers, you're upsetting people.
Right, right. And so even as we started this and we're wondering about what does a march mean? A march doesn't solve anything. A march doesn't work on the real issues. We've almost forgotten what folks were even marching about. Well, I think that's a real criticism. And though, I think it gives us the opportunity to have conversations like this and to get together and really think about and talk about and remember what this stuff was all about in the first place.
But I think also, I would like to push back a little bit, and I haven't seen the video from H. Soul that you're talking about, but I would push back a little bit. I am somebody who still believes in getting in the streets. I really am a person, even if there's not much happening, quote unquote, even if you're just out there having a parade, I think there's something to be said for people being present out in the street, standing up and being counted. I think that counts for something. When I lived, I know, Rebecca, you and I we're both from New York and we lived in Oakland, right? So we've kind of had a similar kind of trajectory. But when I moved to Oakland, that was where I really got into radical shit and where I really started going out for things. And I went out for all the Occupy marches. I wasn't part of Occupy itself, the tent city, in the field there, because I have a kid and a job and stuff. We can edit that, but no, I went out for all the marches, all the direct actions, shutting down the court. I went and walked in the street, with Angela Davis and Boots Riley and was there.
Yeah. And
I remember thinking people would always try to criticize it as, what are you accomplishing? What are you doing? And it's, man, the state does not want to see 10,000 of you in the street.
That's right.
The state does not want to see that many people just letting you know, we're here. We're willing to take the day off work and be here in the street.
Right.
So fuck around and find out.
That's right.
And that's kind of what you're saying.
And I don't ride. I ride. I ride with H Soul. What I would say in support of your pushback is we've got to stop thinking in these either or, these false dichotomies. We can actually do both. We can march in the streets, and we can get some other stuff done too.
So I would like to ask, though, on this subject, are you planning on going to the Women's March that will be in Denver, Colorado this Saturday, with January 20th? And I kind of want to talk about it. Because I love what you just said, James, to stand up and be counted. I do see that as important, and I don't want to make light of that either. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask, are you going to the march?
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too cold. Because I'm old, but yes.
So I would like to say kind of an unpopular opinion right now. Is my thought.
Fuck the Women's March.
No, is that...
You heard it here, folks. That's Rebecca Henderson's position.
Oh, man.
No.
Bam.
I thought, honestly, I was like, oh, man, do I have to go to this march? That's really part of what I was feeling like. I'm like, man, my friend's coming. Do I really want to go to this? And part of me doesn't want to go because, I got other stuff to do. And, and I got my little baby. And I'm like, be nice to sleep in on that Saturday or whatever. But I also felt like, man, I can't be leaving people hanging because what if people don't show up? So I guess I better show up. And I literally tonight said that to my husband. I was like, I guess we're going to this march. We'll take Kingston. We'll take Sammy. And we're going to go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to go to this march, even though I'm not psyched about it. Because I have my own feelings. And something that you sparked when you were talking about Dr. King and his letter from the Birmingham jail was this idea about the nice white people. Mm-hmm. And one of our questions that came from our Facebook, it's pretty long, so I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but basically is about why is it that so many white people get so hurt when people point out instances of racial injustice, and why do they just, their default reaction is to be very defensive, and how can we help them to be able to stop freaking out and have their direct response be, not all white people did that, because we all have seen that. And honestly, I hate to say this, White James, but you were called out specifically.
By who?
But maybe James,
Oh.
but maybe James
Oh.
can talk about this process as a white person of learning to lower our defenses and listen instead of freaking out.
You said calling out. I thought someone was really taking me to task.
No,
All right,
but
that's-
just that saying that you maybe could offer like a white perspective on this. This is something that I specifically really struggle with, and I have been really thinking about it a lot, is to try to give people examples that I think they will understand. So if I'm saying to somebody, for example, okay, you loved Donald Trump. You voted for him. How would you feel about Donald Trump grabbing your daughter's pussy? How would you feel about that? Right? Now, to me, that's me trying to get in their head and be like, hey, think about it. Like, you have a daughter. This is what you need to be thinking about. But they cannot hear anything I'm saying because all they can hear is daughter and pussy, and that is like pretty fucking terrible. And even I can admit that that is too much. So that's also part of this question from Jessica, is just how do we do it? What's a successful way to do it? And I'm doing it wrong, okay? I'm doing it wrong, and I don't think I'm gonna stop doing it wrong. Can somebody help me?
Is it my turn? I don't want to get too philosophical, but
Sorry.
I've had a few glasses of wine, so I might.
That's what we do.
So it's very tiresome to hear people talk about identity politics, right? Because that's usually a euphemism for any kind of decent behavior, usually when people complain about identity politics. But I do think that there's something to be said. There is a certain manner of thinking about identity and thinking about collectivism that I think is not always super helpful. I think there is a way to think of history in terms of groups, which is valuable in certain ways because those groups have had tremendous influence in how the narrative of history has moved. But I think they also sometimes prevent us from just thinking in basic individual human terms. Individual humans do not like to hear criticism. They do not like to hear anything.
Exhibit A.
Well, right. And maybe that could be, and I'm not telling you that it's your job to empathize with white people on racism, but since you're asking, I would say that maybe that could be the starting point to just sort of realize that when a white person hears white people, they hear me. And they think that you're talking about me, and my initial response is simply to defend myself. And my personal philosophy in life has very much been to try to divest myself from my ego and to divest myself from an obsession with the self and to just see the world in rational terms. A person who, I just had a conversation with a man about this earlier today, who was bothered by the Aziz Ansari story and was bothered by this idea that he was saying, I've never done anything harmful to a woman, so why should I, on a date with a woman, have this presumption of guilt put on me?
Wow.
And the idea is, if I'm walking, this has happened many times, this happened to every man there is. I've been walking through a dark parking garage, and there's been another woman in the dark parking garage with me. And if she starts walking faster and clutching her keys, I don't get to have my feelings hurt because I'm not a rapist.
Yeah.
She's been down this road before, and she's being pragmatic and logical about the world that she lives in. And it's very unfortunate that all the complex depth of me as a human does not come into play in that moment. But unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. And that's the way that I try to view these race conversations. I don't love to hear, when I'm a white guy, white straight guy in a room, I don't love to hear when people hate white people, hate men, hate straight dudes.
Yeah.
I get it. It doesn't feel good. And to me, that's part of the thing. I'm not sitting here getting off on shitting on white dudes, like whatever. I wish that that didn't have to be the conversation. And it doesn't make me feel good on a personal level. But if I can divest myself and try to understand why a person would feel that way and why they would approach a conversation that way, then maybe that's where I can start the discussion. So I think it's a struggle for people of all kinds in all situations to separate themselves from personal defensiveness and try to approach a conversation in that way. And I think that's difficult. And maybe it just needs to be difficult. Why do you have to feel good?
So one of the reasons that I brought this up, though, was because I had a moment like that today. Because when I read those stories about Aziz Ansari, whom I really enjoy, I love him. I'm very into Lena Waithe. I really love her more than him. But
she's the female lead in Master of None?
Yeah. She's his black gay friend, and I just love her. So anyway, so I read that, and when I read it, I had a reaction to it, and I did write a piece about it. But my reaction to the account from Grace, that's the name there that she was using to protect her identity, I read it and I was kind of like, this just sounds like a bad date and some bad sex, and you regret it, and you're trying to bring this dude down when he's at the height of his career. That was my reaction. I'm not proud of that fucking reaction, and it cost me something to sit here and say it as a feminist, but at the same time, that was my real thought about it, because as a woman, I have been in that situation countless times where I'm this is something I don't really want to be doing right now, but I'll just finish it because I'm here. And when I had that thought, it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, because I know so many people who have been victims of abuse and victims of sexual assault. And I suddenly realized this is how white people feel when they don't want to speak out and they're so afraid to ask a question because they don't, one, it's true, they don't want to hurt people's feelings. They don't want to make you uncomfortable. But two, they don't want it to reflect badly back upon them. And I know, because in that moment, when I didn't say anything on social media, and as you people know, I will say just about anything on social media to the point of having to delete shit, okay? I didn't want to say anything.
Right.
Because I didn't want anyone to think that I'm not a feminist, that I'm not a revolutionary, that I'm not a critical thinker, because I thought I had a certain reaction to that. And so it was very helpful to me today, because I'm realizing, okay, maybe the way I'm coming at people is not the best way.
Well, best. Best is an interesting thing. When the gentrification summit happened on Saturday, one of the first things that happened was that a Native American person got up in the sanctuary and said, you all are living on Native American ground, okay? And they're people of color. It wasn't just white folks. I live on Native American ground, okay? And it just points out that there are different dimensions of privilege. And so when we are confronting aspects of privilege, one useful thing is to identify our own aspects of privilege. And as we do that, we might be able to have some empathy for where other people are coming from with their privilege. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that if you choose, one way to try to help people is to just get more information about where they're coming from, why they feel how they do, and maybe do it in a way where you're not, as you're gathering information, trying to impose judgment. Because sometimes when people tell you where they're coming from, that's opportunity to engage them. But I think we wind up getting too apologetic about not wanting to hurt other people's feelings who are engaged in systems of oppression that are subordinating others. And so I don't know what the answer is, but sometimes we need to, number one, know what our feelings are and be saying, you know what, I might not be right, but this is how I feel about something. And when we are the ages that like we are around this table, I give some credence to whatever our feelings are, whether our feelings are rationally right or wrong. That's number 3. I think that's number 3. And number 4.
I'll denote these later.
And number 4 is, I think it's okay to be unapologetic. Sometimes I do not give a fuck if your feelings are hurt because my feelings are hurt. And when my people, and I don't even, listen, I'm like an affluent black dude. Okay, so I'm not like poor and oppressed and oh yeah. Any ladies out there? No.
Dr. Diggs is single.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me around to a question that I was going to ask you as a follow-up question. Is it just unrealistic that we have this fantasy that we're going to come to agreements in one conversation? Is just, if you want to understand where someone's coming from and you want to understand someone's perspective and you want to give them your perspective and create a change, if that's your intention. Now, in some circumstances, you might have a conversation where someone just comes at you with inappropriate shit and your response is just going to be, fuck you. And that might be the conversation. But if the purpose of the conversation is actually to change hearts and minds, as they say, is that ever going to happen in one conversation?
No.
That's like a movie fantasy.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. No. So you answer your own question, but yes, I agree with you. It's like it's this ongoing work, but where I struggle is that in my personal relationships is I oftentimes I do what I do, and the white people's reaction is always to pull back so far that I can't get them back. I can't. I can't do anything. And honestly, part of me is just like, oh well.
So my old friend Bruce gave me this quote, and he says, "Race relations is a coalition of the willing." So people have to be willing to go in and out. And now I've had a recent situation similar to this. And I'm going to shout out my brother Brian Diggs because he's been going through this with me. But I have an old friend that I only knew for like a year in junior high school, white. Her name is Kelly. I won't say any more than that, but, And she has now showed up online and asked for help because she's lived a white life in a white world, and she was asking for help. If I'm interested, she says, how can you help me? But then she was directive in the help she wanted, right? And so my brother and I were like, hey, here's how you do it. Read this, watch this video, do this, and then, come back and then we'll talk about it. Then she was like, well, I ain't got time for that. I want you to, I just saw this thing with...
Give me the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, give me the Cliff Notes. I saw this thing on Ta-Nehisi Coates and Cornel West, and I read it, and I want you to answer my questions about that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We'll help you, but we're not going to help you on your terms. You don't know anything. But we will help you. But she's like, no, you got to do it my way. And I'm like, yeah.
But that's where I feel like I'm always getting stuck, where I become quite entrenched in this idea where I'm like, no, I'm not going to bend.
Right.
You bend.
Right.
I've been bending this whole time, and my ancestors have been bending, and this is what's happening, and I need you to come meet me because I don't have time to meet you.
Right.
And
so that's where I draw the line. So here's where I draw the line. You and I are in different places just because I've been doing this a little longer. So my thing is this.
Because I'm so young.
No, yeah, and you are young and beautiful and all that.
Greg almost said no, and then he said no. And so
That's not even true. But I'll be meeting folks where they are. You get to choose. You get to choose, and there's no wrong or right answer. You have to go with, how you feel.
But do you think that there's and I don't want to be in a devil's advocate position here, but I do wonder.
You mean a white devil's advocate?
A white devil's advocate.
It's tough up in here. Woo! It's tough up in here. Everybody take a sip.
Everybody take a drink.
Everybody
I said it. What?
Taking a slow sip. there are people who get off on that cyclical conversation of, and I wish when Theo E.J. Wilson was here on our last episode 6, which everyone should listen to, Theo E.J. Wilson has posted some stuff online about how he is really concerned about call-out culture and is really concerned that a lot of call-out culture and stuff coming out of the left is basically modeled after the same sort of methods of oppressing and shutting people down, even if it's toward different ends. And I do wonder I see conversations online. You might have, my poor dad. My dad's a great guy. I always say my dad because my dad is a classic example of just like a 60-ish white guy.
Yeah.
And I think about my dad, somebody who given the time that he's lived through, he's just about the same age as Dr. Diggs here. He's pretty up to date and progressive on things, but there's some shit he doesn't know anything about. He doesn't know anything about trans issues. That's to a suburban white guy, whatever, right. That is some brand new shit, whatever. And I think about a guy like my dad. If my dad gets on Twitter and uses the wrong pronoun about somebody's going to obliterate him. And then when he responds, hey, what did I do wrong? They're going to relish in responding, it's not my job to educate you. Mm-hmm. And then that's the end of the conversation and nobody learned anything. And is there a tendency to do that? A tendency to relish in being right and telling the other person they're so wrong that we can't even talk to them?
That's me in a nutshell. And that's why today was a real moment for me, because in the piece I wrote, in the end, I was like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but please help me understand this. I'm one of the good ones. Right? But that's really where
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
But I want, because I do need help.
No, but see, help. Okay, so I'm not going to argue with you on that, but I'm going to say it this way. It's really about being empathetic and understanding where people are coming from. And when you can be self-reflective and put yourself in that position, you start to feel it and understand it in a different way than if you're just taking it in from the other folks. So that's, again, a first step. At the same time, and so I'm going to say it this way, call-in culture is an excellent thing. It is an excellent concept. But it is not the only concept. And I'm going to tell you and drop the mic. I'm going to tell you and drop the mic. Black culture is a call-out culture. We got a whole thing called signifying. And we will loud talk you. We will clown you. We will snap. We will crack. We will talk about your mama. We'll talk about your big-ass head. We'll talk about anything that you got.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We will do that. No, I ain't talking about you. If I talk about your head, you got a tiny ass head.
I feel like your forehead that big though. You do have a big forehead.
You got a big forehead.
But that's because you have a big brain in there, White James.
You got an 8 head.
Don't try to fucking walk it back. Wow.
No, but the thing is, black culture happens to be a call-out culture. And matter of fact, y'all went with me. But I started talking about this. First of all, I've been warning some of my white friends that here in Denver, the black folks I talk to, they're getting ready to call some stuff out. The colored people I talk, and then I was at the church on Sunday.
Praise him.
Woo! And there were some words called out like, hypocrite and coonery and stuff from the pulpit. All right? From the pulpit. All right? We have a call, when the time comes, we have a call-out culture. And I'm not saying it's right. I think I'm saying it's a choice. And we need to use all of our choices. There are times to call in. There are times to call out.
Right.
I think it's good to call out.
Can you just give a definition of call in? Would you mind? Because I think I know what you're saying, but I want to be clear.
And I'm not sure that I have a definitive definition, but here's the way I understand it. It's this notion of when there is discord and conflict with people that you want to maintain and continue relationships with, no matter how proximal or how distant. it's this notion of rather than call them out in a way that they lose face and you can't continue a relationship, you kind of bring them in, find out more where they're coming from, and sort of quietly and on the side, try to educate them and support their learning and growth. You call them in. You say, okay, something's going on here. I recognize it. But rather than make you lose face in front of everybody here, I'm going to say, hey, can we come to the side and can we work on this? That's a sort of a calling in.
Okay, no one can see my face right now, but it is not a pleasant one because can I be real? As you were describing that, I was thinking, nah, man, fuck that. I'm not doing that. I don't like it. I like to call people out. I do. And maybe that's my black side. I don't know. But I feel like I think that we are too polite every day. And this shit is not polite. This is people's lives are on the line. This is real talk. And so I don't feel like I need to be taking somebody over and worried about
because
their
if you don't
feelings.
if you don't say nothing, you go home crying. You go home mad. You go home trying to talk to your partner, about what just went down at work or what just went down in the meeting. Your kid is trying to say, I love you, mommy. I love you, mama. You all mad and stuff, right? So I get it. And all I will say is that's an answer and it's real. And we need to stop apologizing for being mad and upset. At the same time, it's not our only choice.
Okay.
It's not our only choice.
Do you feel that you differentiate between a good faith question and a bad faith question?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. And I answer that totally without hesitating because I've been in that situation. As a mixed race person, I get some questions because people do feel more comfortable asking me, and by people I mean white people and also black people actually, but feel more comfortable asking me questions because I don't look phenotypically like what they expect a black person to look like or what they expect a white person to look like. So I do feel like that has been a role in my life where yes, I know when someone's asking me a question, a good faith question, and I'm often ready to answer it.
And I'm in a different space. So I'm in that space that Rebecca just described. But I find myself over the last 3 years in a new space because I've in my life, I have felt like I've spent my entire life trying to work with all kinds of different people and accommodate their space. And I've done that at the expense of my black space. And what has happened is, especially with these Trayvon Martins and other things, is I find myself sometimes in a black space and realizing that when I go to work, I suppress that.
Yeah.
And I do this whole sort of white nice thing. And I don't feel so nice all the time. And I've been wondering over 3 years now if that's a problem where, I'm like, I wish a motherfucker would ask me how I feel today.
So I had that day recently. It was the day the story broke about Donald Trump calling, the story of him saying, why should we have people coming from these shithole countries?
Which were the shithole countries? Haiti and
all of Africa.
Was that what he said?
Literally.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so.
No, I thought there was a South American country. Oh, no.
It was El Salvador, I think.
El Salvador.
Right.
And don't be talking about my El Salvadorians.
Eventually, it was anywhere but Norway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually.
So that was a black day for me. And I think it was a black day for a lot of people, right? Where we're like, come on, are you still defending him?
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you. I mean, I think that's beyond.
You better
beyond.
not even try to disagree. You know where you at.
I mean, I think it's beyond. I think there's no... There are places where I can empathize with these maybe gray areas and places where people fell in between. But at this point, if you don't know what this president's about and if you don't know what's happening, that's willful.
It's just hard to be able to even try to have a conversation with someone like that where I'm not at a point where I can even really do it anymore, right? Where I'm just like, nope.
Well,
I don't think that's your responsibility. I mean, I think that's so far removed from something like a microaggression conversation about whether you should be having a conversation about if someone commits a faux pas about your hair or something like that. That's so far removed.
Stop asking me if this is my real hair. Yeah. Damn.
Sorry. I mean, the president going out of his way to call Haiti a shithole
or shit house. Nobody really
whatever.
cares.
Yeah,
it doesn't
whichever
matter.
way. Right.
I'm just trying to keep the facts.
We're me and you and Trump are New Yorkers. Nobody would say shit house. It would be shithole.
It would be shithole.
It's shithole.
Yeah, no. I agree.
I mean, that's not something where we need to say. We just asked about good faith versus bad faith.
Right.
There's no good faith in calling a country a shithole. We don't need to fucking have that conversation.
But what I find, I'm sorry. What I find most sort of terrifying or upsetting or sickening about that is how many people, their response to that, I almost want to cry right now because they're like, he just says what we're all thinking. I'm not thinking that Haiti is a shithole. I don't know about you, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess you're not thinking that either.
The president is a white supremacist.
Right.
And I think, to me, that is something that I'm just trying to say out loud all the time, wherever I am.
Right.
Even in
too.
places
Me too.
where people are not inclined to agree with me. Even if I'm in a room full of white liberals, I like to go out of my way to say that Trump is a white supremacist because most white liberals are not quite ready to say that. And I think you just have to be willing to say that. Does that move the needle? I don't know, but it's true.
One of my guilty pleasures now, I'd be clowning on some white folks who are racist. I'd be like, motherfucker, and then I just go in, I use all of my stuff. I wish a motherfucker would be a Donald Trump supporter, right? Because, and I don't do it all the time, but I'm confessing that it's actually I'm looking for somebody to fuck up, rhetorically. I'm not saying it's right.
But is there a certain sort of, and I realize that, maybe this is more a question for somebody like me than for guys than people like you. Because for me, maybe it can be a little more of a philosophical or detached or academic question. Whereas, again, I believe the president of the United States is a white supremacist. So people who aren't white are much more directly implicated in that. But the people who say, hey, this is a sizable minority of the country that supports Donald Trump through thick and thin. Something like 30% of the country is propping up Donald Trump forever. Is there some sort of responsibility to maintain some kind of rapport with these people? If Rwanda can have a genocide where half of the population is literally knocking on the front door and hacking to death the other half of the population. And 10 years later, they're just a democratic country running business as usual. Does America have some responsibility to find some way to move on from this? Or should we just draw these lines in the sand and declare what side you're on and be ready to fight?
That is such a hard question. And because I'm hearing that frequently. Well, we're so divided, and we have to come together. And my initial honest response to that is line in the sand. Mm-hmm. That is my response to it. You're either with me or you're against me. And that is truly how I feel on an emotional level, right? That's how I feel. I'm like, you know what? You're either down or you're not. Mm-hmm. Rationally, that cannot be because this is America and we got to make it through somehow. And it's like the things we were talking about with Theo Wilson. Like, for real, are we really going to leave the country?
I'm leaving.
Greg bought his ticket. But I mean, are we? Greg's out. But for realistically, is that really what's going to happen? And I don't think so. I'm personally, maybe, I don't know, but not really. So we got to try to make this work. And that's why when I think I can try to engage with someone, I do. But I still feel like I'm banging my head against the wall.
But that's what Theo was saying is You got to make a go of it and
Right.
propose something.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, if everything keeps going in a whites only fashion,
Yeah.
you can't see yourself in that paradigm. So it becomes problematic. I mean, yeah.
How do you know when it's failed? I mean, this
don't
is.
know.
I mean,
Good question.
I mean, and this is
Damn.
again. We need a second episode with Theo because I have a lot I want to talk to Theo about. But we were already. He was half falling asleep here by the end of the episode. But I mean, this is no. We kept him here long. You guys hear an hour-long episode, but we talk for like 4 hours. But you know, I wondered that. You know, because my tendency is to agree with Theo Wilson's point of view. It would be ludicrous for me to call myself a black nationalist, but my problem is that when I hear arguments like that on a rational, logical level, I have a very hard time finding points of disagreement with them.
Sure.
And I guess my question is, he says I have a responsibility to try for the best case scenario, but to prepare for the worst. My question is, in human history, really, how do you know when your best case scenario has failed before you're already in a concentration camp or whatever?
I feel like it's close right now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you are really breaking it down and you look at the statistics and the number of black and brown people that are incarcerated, when you look at the wealth distribution, when you look at just what happens on a day-to-day basis, we're there. We need to be getting on that boat, Marcus Garvey style, and bouncing out. And that feels true to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the thing we get into is that if our change is just going to be the same thing with whatever particular group in power, acting like the people in power that we're complaining about, that's also complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know African Americans are like, there should be an African American nation or we should have our African space, and I'm not arguing with that. But if in our African space, we're just going to do the same things that we've been complaining about from our oppressor, what good did we just do? What good did we just do?
May I take us off topic for a moment?
Your thing.
May I? Yeah. It is about this term because I always hear you saying African American. That is not a term that I use. Mm-hmm. And I just don't use it because I don't like it.
Okay.
I use black to describe my race. And I guess I just was curious about it because I don't know. I feel like you often use it, and I want to know if there's any reason behind it, because I guess
I can tell you. Yeah, it's easy. It's easy.
Okay.
I use it in mixed company because it's the most current term. But I also identify as black. I don't really identify as African American.
Okay. I wanted to know that because it's one of those things where when people say it, not you, honestly, but when white people say it, I don't know.
African American?
Yeah, I get a little.
How about after when the whole thing happened with Kramer, with Michael Richards as Kramer, and he went on Letterman and he started talking about Afro Americans?
No, but that's another, because that used to be a thing, though.
It was, because it went like Negro, Afro American, African American, in attempts to like give it like dignity.
My grandparents on both sides of my family were never black, and they were alive. They were never black. They were never African American. They identified as Negro.
Mm-hmm.
They lifelong members of the NAACP. Mm-hmm. They were Negro.
But I think it's like Negro colored.
So colored, yeah. So I don't know where. So
colored,
I was too
Negro?
young. It was Negro for even.
Yeah.
I think Negro and colored occupied the same space, like African American and black.
Yeah.
Even occupies the same space.
Okay.
So I don't think it was a either or. No. Actually, you're on point, because actually that's what. So my grandparents actually first identified as colored.
Yeah.
But also as Negro.
Yeah.
So those are the two ways, because they both sets, both of them, lifelong NAACP. And that's colored people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. But then they identified as Negro. And when my parents started talking about black and proud and afros and dashikis, neither set of my grandparents really identified with
Yeah.
that. That was some radical.
Yeah.
That was some radical stuff, and I was too young to really process it. But I actually remember, and the reason I identify black is because I'm 6 years old in 1968.
Right.
So when I'm starting to pay attention and going to meetings and stuff, that's how I identify. And African American didn't really come into play till like the early 80s.
Yeah.
I think even in the mainstream, though, African American's a little outdated by now, isn't it?
Well, what is it?
I think it's becoming more just people are saying black.
Well, because I feel like black
don't
is
know.
political. I feel like black is more political. I feel like to say you're black is invoking black power. It is invoking because nobody was out in these streets going African American power.
But but let me blow this up.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that, but there's a third term that's in this mix that we don't talk about, but other folks are talking about nigga
Right?
and identify
Yes.
as nigga.
But no, but it's like, women reclaiming bitch. That's the name of my blog, Denver Bitch.
Right.
Right? Which my father hates.
Yeah.
He's like, why would you call my daughter a bitch?
But the thing is, that's a show.
But don't call me a bitch.
I tell you what
We're
I-
about to
language is a show. That's
Yeah.
that's a show.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
That's
I
a
mean,
show.
I feel like my position is I just am going to call people whatever they want to be called because none of them are my categories. So
Right.
I use black because most of the black people I know refer to themselves as black. So I'll use black and that's fine with me. But like, there are certain things that I don't like. I use people of color because people use it.
Yeah.
But I don't like it because grammatically, it's just an inversion of
Yeah.
colored people.
Right.
Right.
It makes me feel weird. I
Yeah.
don't really like
no,
people
that's
of
a
color.
that's a real thing because
Yeah.
when that term first started kind of coming around, I don't know exactly, but I feel like it was in like late 90s maybe.
It seems pretty recent to me.
So right. Well,
But that's when I started using it. Let's say that. I started using it in like maybe 2001 where to describe because I was working in a lot of multicultural organizations. And so that was the terminology. We say people of color. And that's to lump us all together, right? So we don't have to say black
Right.
and this and that. We just want to get
Well,
it all.
and I use that too. But I have been in situations where people will ask me, what do those people want to be called? And it can be any of those people, right? And my answer always is more to what James is saying is I just take the time to. It's like it depends on who you're talking about, and you really kind of got to ask them because there's no way to know. People identify all kinds of different ways. And actually, I learned from my son. So this is my new gender blown mind thing, and I have to get used to it. Like gender fluid. I'm like, what you talking about? Gender fluid? You're either this or you're that. But I've been informed that no, actually, some people change depending on the situation and the day. Bam, mind blown. But I ask, and when I get the information, it's like, oh.
Well, I always thought I was politically correct saying Native American until I found out that a lot of folks actually prefer to be called Indian, which blows my mind
Right.
historically. But
Yeah.
if that's what they prefer to be called, I mean, it's understandable.
And you don't know unless you ask somebody.
Right. If somebody here took me aside and went, James, stop saying black. I like African American. What am I going to do? I'm going to argue with you? It's whatever you like to be called.
The funny
should
thing
be,
is, yeah, so you say that.
Right.
But here's the thing. People argue all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But I have
And
a
lecture.
very serious question.
Yeah.
James, what do you like to be called?
Oh, see, dag.
I like to be called White James. That's funny.
I did want to, the only thing I wanted to kind of get to just a little bit before we get into our next topic is I wanted to, Anna from our Facebook page, she did have a question. You know, we were talking about the shithole countries and that. And her question was, I'm curious if you have any opinions about businesses, libraries, allies embracing Trump's shithole countries by having like displays. Like, for example, the Lyric Movie Theater is going to be doing a shithole African Film Fest. And she just wants to know if that is taking power away from Trump and giving it to people of color or what, if we had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know fully what it even means yet.
So it's been going around, I feel like, just on online, people have been saying.
Are they meaning it as pejorative or supportive?
Supportive.
So the different news organizations and things like that have had different ways of dealing with this. So NPR had a thing where they were like, well, we have to say the word shithole because the word shithole is the story. But you can only say it a certain number of times per broadcast, and you can only say it after a certain hour. And this is how censorship works, right? CNN, on the other hand, as the like official state enemy of Donald Trump, they said shithole every 4 seconds for 48 hours.
Yeah.
All they did was say shithole.
Chris Cuomo wrote it on a whiteboard.
Right. And their position, I think, was, this isn't a stated position, but I think their position was, if we're living in a world where the president says shit like that, then what we're going to do is say it all night long. And if the word shithole hurts your feelings, then you should be wondering what it means to have a president who says that in cabinet meetings.
Right.
And so that's like the mentality. And I think what Rebecca's referring to via this listener question is the question of if libraries and movie houses and all these people take this word shithole and say, we're going to stick it in your face. This is what your president says about people. Is that effective or is it not?
So my initial response to it is no. Like, I think it's fine.
It's not effective?
No, I think it's not effective. I don't think anybody should be having a shithole African movie film festival. I think that is gross, personally. This is me, just my opinion on it. And, I think it's fine for you to tweet a picture of your nice house in Nigeria, for example, and say, here I am in front of my shithole house. I think that's fine. But I don't think that I'm going to be making any displays with the word shithole on them at my job. Mm-hmm. Now, I may put a display of Haitian authors. I may do that. I may put a history display up of all of the great contributions that Africans have made in the world. I may do something like that. But I'm not ready to be calling things shithole because I'm feeling some kind of way about it.
I'm a believer that we can't beat these people at their game. That's my belief now. After a year of Trump campaigning and a year of Trump as president, I think that the left trying to win this schoolyard fight is a failure, just outright. I don't think that we can do it because we don't have the character for it, because we're not those people. And so I think that every time I see the left try to co-opt these phrases and try to turn something around and point it at them, when we called them deplorables, they said, yeah, we're deplorable, fuck you. And they won that. When we said, you guys spread fake news, they said, yeah, fake news, everything's fake news, nothing is real. And they won that. And now we're going to say, aren't you ashamed to say shithole? And they say, no, we're not ashamed. We're assholes. We don't care. And they're going to win this too.
So
I don't think we win this battle.
I think you're absolutely right. Because we say stuff like balderdash. Or we say stuff like, we think we're getting down and we're saying alternative facts. Ooh, you see what we said? We got them now. No, motherfucker, we need to say asshole. We need to say, if we're going to do it, to your point, James, we'll never win because we try to be so proper and polite, even when we are being critical and stuff. But I'm like, we could win we could win, especially if we put some colored folks in there. Not colored folks necessarily in office, but we need to unleash some people, because if I start calling you a racist motherfucker, listen, it's going to go down differently. It's going to go down differently than if I say, oh, you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
You're using alternative facts.
Right.
That's the kind of nerd, cerebral, liberal way to go. But it's like, no, if you in the fight, you got to fight because the Republicans are fighting and shit.
See, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm almost saying the opposite of that. I mean, I think
you are saying the opposite
I think
of that.
people should say whatever they feel and whatever's natural to them or whatever they believe. But I think my thing is my life as a politically conscious person, which is not super long. I'm about to be 35.
Oh, little baby, you're so cute.
You're only like 4 years older than me.
What the hell are you talking about my age for on here?
I edit this. But I was kind of interested in this stuff from a relatively young age, but let's say maybe 10. So I've maybe been paying attention for like 25 years. Is that I constantly see Democrats and the left trying to be like Republicans because we perceive the Republicans as being the tough guys and we want to be like them and we think that's how we have to beat them. And that's how Clinton, who for some reason is some kind of darling of the left, even though he became successful by imitating a Republican, as far as I could tell, in every manner, from prison policy to drug policy to welfare policy to everything, is we constantly think that if we just pretend to be Republicans, they'll like us.
I know,
and I just think it's bullshit. I know,
and so we're agreeing, but we're disagreeing because here's the thing: liberals and progressives always want to be nice, and what I'm saying is, once you recognize you're in a fight, you've got to fight.
Yeah,
you can't hug it out.
Right.
On some levels, I'm saying the same thing. You can't, the dude is like hitting you upside the head and you're going to try to hug him.
Right.
You can't, you can't. Sometimes you have to bust a bully in the mouth.
Right.
But you can't like wrestle him kind of
Right.
thing. You got to bring a gun to a gunfight.
My analogy is like you should fight, but you should fight with the weapons that you're actually good with.
Ooh.
Like,
Damn.
Damn.
Like, dang.
Drop it. I agree.
Not to stretch your analogy too fucking far, but like if the guy is coming at you with a sword and you're a, nunchuck expert, go at it with the nunchucks. Don't pretend you have a sword when you don't have one.
Touche.
And it's like, I feel like
love that.
that's what the left likes to do. And that drives me crazy because we're not good at it. And we talked about this when Langston was on, which would have been episode 5, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how getting rid of Franken and getting rid of Conyers,
That's right.
a lot of people in the Democratic Party said, this is a bad idea. These guys are backbones of our party. This is going to make us look bad. And you and I agreed that actually what we're saying is, here's an alternative to the bullshit that Republicans are giving you.
Right.
For the next generation going forward, the generation of Me Too and the generation of all this stuff, we're done with this and we're moving forward with something new. But I think that this is a choice now with stuff like this is the left always thinks it can co-opt shithole. It always thinks it can co-opt fake news.
Agree.
And we don't succeed at that.
Well,
I think if we could try to be the adults in the room,
No,
we are smarter.
That's where we disagree. That's where we disagree.
I'm
I think
loving
that's been our fail. We are smarter, but that's been our fail. That's been our fail. Is we keep thinking that if we're just smart enough and say the right thing and be the adults in the room, then everybody will go along with that. What I'm saying is, and this is not totally disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is, once we're in a fight, we've got to fight.
I get that.
We've got to fight. And I like your analogy in terms of don't use everybody else's tools. You use the tools you're good at.
Right.
But I'm saying we need to use fighting tools. We need to stop, just saying, oh, we're going to do Marcus to Queensberry rules when people are doing like all kinds of other stuff. They're saying no, this is a street fight.
I think
once we're in a fight, sooner or later we have to bust somebody in the mouth.
Tell me if I'm wrong. What I think you're talking about is, and I think we've agreed on this before, is the the tendency of these people don't want to use the words of what's really happening.
Right.
People don't want to say, and this has changed this week. Actually, the shithole thing
This is the first
changed
time.
things.
Right. That's right.
People
New
are
game.
saying Trump's a liar.
Right.
We didn't used to say racist. We used to say racially charged.
Right.
Now
Not
we
if you
say
were
racist.
Rebecca.
Well,
Not if you were Rebecca.
No, the three of us at this table have been saying racist for 2 years. But the mainstream media was saying, oh, racially charged comments. Now we're
say
saying
liar.
racist. We
Yeah.
weren't
Say
saying liar. We
alternative
were saying,
facts.
oh, he said a thing that wasn't true. Yeah, that's called a fucking lie. Call it that.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with that. But I think what I want to get at is, I just think, we all kind of laughed at Hillary when she did Hillary in the debates doing the thing where she was kind of mocking Trump and kind of when she wiggled her shoulders and chuckled at him and whatever. We all chuckled because Trump's a clown to us. But it didn't win us the election, did it? And it didn't work.
Because we act like it's a beauty pageant, and at least a third of the country are all MMA. And when we don't do MMA, and I'm not recommending MMA, but I'm just like, we got to know the game we're in. We got to know the game we're in, and don't walk into the MMA ring.
But their strength is that they have no fucking scruples. Their strength is that
So
they
you got
have...
to do, okay.
Their
yep.
strength is that they have no ethic for how a society should be run. If that's not the society I want to live in, then imitating them is not the way to beat them.
That's why you're coming with us to Africa.
White James, you're in. Listen, if half black Rebecca can go, White James can also go.
But this comes around to the king thing, doesn't it? So we can't all be nonviolent in every situation, and violence might be...
Some of us can.
Well, maybe some of us have that strength of character, yeah. But it's not that we're saying that everyone should be the nice guy in every situation. But it's, if we really perceive, and I think this is true, if we really perceive that the argument between right and left in this country right now is an argument between completely morally bankrupt and people who give a shit, I can't pretend I don't give a shit in order to beat them.
No, but you don't have to.
I don't understand how that's the fight.
And here's what, I hope we said this in one of the first podcasts, and I know I've said this in the community. When we engage with our public officials, we can't be like burning down the house and stuff.
Right.
We need to have a reasoned, discourse. And so we still need to move in the nonviolent king tradition, but that's not the only way we need to move.
Right.
By any means necessary. That's where I'm at.
I hear you. And what I'm saying is somebody's got to be there because that helps create the space.
And I don't
For
say that
other
because
things
I'm
to
a
happen.
super violent person or
I know,
anything.
no,
But
I
I
get it.
say it when the way I interact with
I get
people
it.
and when I use those harsh examples that hurt people when I'm
That's
trying to
right.
reach them is because I'm on some by any means
People don't-
necessary tip right now. That's what I'm doing.
Some people don't hear you till you bust them in the mouth.
There's a diversity of opinion and a diversity of tactics, and that's a valuable thing, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah.
isn't it a valuable thing today,
That's
as
right.
much as it was then, to have a king and also to have a nation of Islam?
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
And
Yeah.
just as today, we see all this infighting between
Right.
the hard left and the liberals. The Bernie-crats and the Hillary-crats want to fight each other. But I mean, there really is room
That's right.
for diversity of opinion, and people can unite against
That's how
a
we're
common
stronger.
enemy.
That's how we're stronger.
So wait, what you're saying is it's okay for me to continue on as I have been?
That's always been okay. You're a sovereign individual.
No, but I say that
It depends on what you're. I mean, to honestly answer your question,
Yes.
it depends on what you're looking for. If that's what I said earlier. If what you're looking for is that you want to be real and you want to be true to how you feel and you want to deal with situations as they come, then all you can do is that. If what you want to do is change hearts and minds,
You got to go a
then you
different
might
way.
have to take a different
You have
route.
to go a different way.
And you don't have to change hearts and minds. That's not your
Right.
responsibility. But
choose
if
your
that's what
role.
you choose to do, then you may have to take a different route.
This is about
Absolutely.
me. This is about me. Please just let it be. Okay.
yeah.
I don't feel, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying this, honestly. I don't think I am in a place of changing hearts and minds.
That's okay.
I think I'm in a place where I'm like, I just have to live my life, say what I think, and
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
we will revisit this in 2020 when Oprah Winfrey is our president.
Who's the vice president? That's the important question.
It's The Rock. Everybody knows that. Wouldn't that be? Okay, so I did want to.
We're going to talk about their Oprah thing.
I
That's
did
what's
want to
gonna-
talk about it.
Yep.
I did want to talk about it only because, okay, so I would like to start, if that's all right. So I watched the Golden Globes in real time with my hubs. We were watching it. And when Oprah, I was already mad because I'm mad all the time about about the patriarchy. But when Oprah did her speech, I was sobbing. I was crying. Like, it was really emotional. And I looked over at my husband, who is a crier, and his eyes were gently watering. And then when I asked him about it, he said, I wanted to cry, but he had a cold and he didn't want to get more boogers, so he held it back. Okay? So we were both sitting there having this moment of feeling like we were hearing something important. Mm-hmm. And we were not thinking about the presidency or elections. Right. It was just an important moment.
Where did that come from?
It was an important moment.
The presidency thing. Where did that come from?
That came the day after.
That came after. Then people were like, it sounds
seemed to me
like
it was the same night.
No, it happened. No, it was.
Morning.
On Twitter.
Yeah.
It was. People went crazy when she did her speech because the end of her speech did flirt with a campaign rhetoric because she was like, a new day is coming or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you get a car. No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't.
That'll be her first campaign promise.
But it was, and she told the story of Reese Taylor, and she just really touched me.
It was the Obama speech.
It was a moment for Black people. I felt like that was a moment, and that was what my husband and I were both feeling, and we felt really emotional watching it.
Yeah.
And then I made the mistake that I often make of going on the internet.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
It's always a mistake, honestly. Anyway, I went on Twitter, and I felt like people, all I could see was, no, that's such a terrible idea. Oprah 2020 is terrible. She's a celebrity, blah, blah, blah. And I had a response for it. And I was just like, listen, give us a fucking minute here, okay? No, honestly, do I think Oprah should be the president? I don't, okay? I love Oprah a lot. I don't think Oprah would enjoy being the president. I don't think she would enjoy that.
Oprah has told us time and again she's not running for president.
I know, except that then after this, she said maybe she would think about it, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of hubbub, but that's not the point to me. The point was, I hated the reaction of people being like, no, that's stupid, when I'm like, she's a Black woman that is powerful and strong and smart, and you're telling me she's not good enough for the office when we have Donald Trump as our president?
It maybe speaks more to the state that we're in, that some lady can't give a good showbiz award speech without us talking about the presidency or whatever. When Sally Field was up there saying, you love me, you really love me, nobody started talking about the presidency the same night. Like, it's like, that's almost like where we're at, that we're so desperate for a hero. We're so desperate for somebody to be substantive.
That's what we just did. That's how Donald Trump got here. He's like, oh, if a Black guy can be president, anybody can be president. Why not me?
Yeah.
It's this whole celebrity thing. And I think that speaks to your thing. We could easily get into... America is such a celebrity nation that we could easily start getting into that. Who's a popularity contest? Who's the most beautiful? Who's had the best movies? Who has the best empire? We could easily get into that.
But I don't think America is like that. I think the 19% of America that elected Donald Trump is like that. I don't actually think America is like that. And I actually think it sells America short, and I think it sells Black voters short to think that it is. Donald Trump, some 19% of the American population voted for Donald Trump. And I don't believe they voted for him because he was a celebrity. I think they voted for him because he was an avowed white supremacist. But to me, we just watched Black voters decisively defeat Roy Moore I don't think black voters need a celebrity in order to get out to the polls.
Well, need is not. Right, I agree with that.
I just think the theme is weird. The theme of the argument.
But it's the way we do. It's
Right.
the way we do, even without celebrity.
Right.
Even with one of the most powerful things in elective politics is name recognition. Okay, and that's not Hollywood celebrity, but it's the same sort of mechanism.
Right.
And we want people to look a certain way. We want people to like look presidential or senatorial or and that's not celebrity writ large.
Right.
But we're actually socialized on some superficial notions of
Right.
who we want to represent us. And so we're primed for celebrity.
I just hate the idea.
Of Oprah?
Not of Oprah specifically. I hate the idea that Trump, again, just like I was just saying about the left playing the right's game. I hate the idea that I hate the idea that Trump being president means we all throw our hands up and say, "Oh well, I guess it's Hollywood Squares now."
Right.
I hate that
that's
shit.
exactly, matter of
That
fact,
bums me out.
first of all, that should be the name. That should Hollywood Squares should be the name of this podcast, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Oh, my
because
God.
what you're saying is that we weren't even planning for Oprah, but as soon as Oprah said something, we're like, "Oh, that's the answer."
Yeah.
That's the
well, I
answer,
would like
though.
to go on record that I said I feel, and no one cared that I said this, but I feel like Donald Trump is dirtying up the presidency and
He
making
is.
it so disgusting that Oprah won't even want it in 2020. She won't even want it because it's
I don't
so
think she
gross.
I don't think she would want it.
So, anyway,
Who would want it? Unless
Not
you were
me.
a power-hungry psychopath like Donald Trump, what sort of billionaire would want to be president? That is nuts. Oprah is living a better life than any
She's
of us could
already right.
ever
She's
imagine.
already got it. Right.
no, and she's doing amazing things. And Oprah, if you hear my voice, girl, I would love for you to come on my podcast.
Yeah, we're booking guests for the spring.
Well, and this,
Oprah, just put it out into the universe.
but this is what I said on.
That's the secret. That's from Oprah. If you just whisper it into the universe.
And you're Rebecca Henderson. You could even run. I made her laugh. You see her laugh?
I can't run for office.
Can I just tell you guys, regardless of who it is, Oprah or whoever else, I'm exhausted just thinking about 2020 right now.
Yeah,
I can't even. I'm waiting.
I
need
feel
28.
you.
I'm waiting for this year.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be.
2016 was so exhausting.
Yeah.
It was.
Even before we lost, it was so
It was
exhausting.
because I had to be out there pounding these streets and stuff and doing my part, whatever. But 2018 is going to be important. And I hope that people kind of do what I consider the right thing. And I hope they get out there and they
I
vote
think we
and-
need to register more people to vote.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I'll probably be spending my time on.
Yeah.
It's like because I was telling people at a forum, I said, look, the first big thing is if all of a sudden we have 50,000, even 50,000 new registered voters, that will scare some people. That's even before the vote.
If you live in a city, if you're young, if you're not white, they are counting on you not to vote in the
That's
midterm.
right. That's right.
All you have to do is vote. Look at what just happened in
That's
Alabama.
right.
Yeah.
All you have to do is vote.
All you have to do is vote. But before
Yeah.
you vote, you got to register to vote. And the first wave of that is if all of a sudden there's an upsurge and people register to vote, that has implications for November.
That may very well just change their candidate.
Right.
Yeah.
They may
So let's
change
hit
their
it.
mind about who they run.
Right.
If they see that.
So to all our listeners, get out there.
Register.
Get registered to vote. Register people to vote.
Stay in school.
Stay-
Stay at school.
Don't do drugs.
Oh my God. How did we end up? It's the most basic after school special.
All right, but seriously.
Don't do
After
drugs.
School Rock is brought to
Eat.
you by Nabisco.
Take your vitamins.
Take your vitamins.
God damn it.
Especially your vitamin O. Oprah 2020.
No, it's got to be President Oprah and Vice President Dr. Phil.
Oh, God.
Now we definitely go in Africa.
Matter of fact, that's the downfall of Oprah. I love Oprah, but we can't have the Oprah crew.
No. Dr. Oz?
Oprah inflicted Phil on us.
Right.
She inflicted Oz on us.
Ileana.
She inflicted Ileana. She's inflicted a lot of. Well,
I like
You like
Rachel
Rachel Ray. I just feel like her recipes are gross. It's like Triscuits and shit. I'm like, I don't want Triscuits at my party.
Wait, Rachel Ray does Triscuit recipes?
I've never seen Rachel Ray do Triscuit.
Google it, you jerks.